Okay guys, Timmy coming at you here. Today we're going to start learning some stuff in general anatomy and physiology. So I want to try and organize this thing where it makes as much sense as possible. So one of the things that the college wants from each course is course competencies, meaning what are you going to be able to do? What are you going to know after you leave this course and you've been successful in the course, right? You've got a C or better in the course. I'm hoping for better than a C from all of you, just so you know. Anyways, so course competencies are the things that you're going to have to learn. I'm going to help you learn as we move through the semester. So the two course competencies that I'm going to cover in this video are, oddly enough, course competency number 1. Yep. So it says apply descriptive, anatomical, physiologic, and directional terminology to the human body and its organization. All right. Well, what does that mean? Okay, watch. This is what it means. What it means is that you're going to have to start learning some medical terminology. It's real simple, right? So if a doctor says the distal epiphyseal plate was injured during the fracture, you're going to have to know where that is. The proximal convoluted tubules are where the vast majority of nutrients are reabsorbed back into the blood in the kidney. All right, look, a lot of that stuff don't make no sense, but watch. If you understand some of the terminology, it makes your life that much easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of the body as a whole, different body cavities. One of the things I want you to do is I'm going to give you a list of terms, and I want you to understand their definitions. So when you come into lab, I'm going to have you start applying those terms that you learned. So for example, watch. I'm going to say to you, when you come into lab, I'm going to say the elbow is what to the wrist. And you should say the elbow is proximal to the wrist. And you can say the opposite. The wrist is distal to the elbow. And again, once again, probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now. You're going to read those chapters, you're going to study those terms, and then when you come in, you're going to start applying them. The second thing, and probably the most important thing, is I'm going to start talking to you about a little bit of the body chemistry. So here we go. Watch. Classify the major chemical components of living things according to their structure and function. All right, look. Again, that probably don't make a lot of sense to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the chemistry of the body for you. And I'm going to break it down and tell you what's important about these chemicals and what's important about these other chemicals, right? Now watch. I get it. I know this is not a chemistry class, it's not a biochemistry class, and it's not an organic chemistry class. The chemistry class that you took was an introductory to chemistry. So I get it. I'm not going to make you go crazy. That's a double bond there. Don't worry about that. I need for you to understand basic general ideas about chemistry. And when we get there, I'm going to show you. All right? So here we go. Video number 1, the first day of the rest of your life in General A&P at Gateway Technical College. All right? Here we go. Watch. 2 main body cavities. What's a cavity? A cavity is a space that stuff goes into in your body. Now, there are 2 main body cavities in the body. A lot of body there. You have your dorsal cavity. That was poor drawing there. I'll fill that in. There you go. the dorsal cavity. And the dorsal cavity contains the cranial cavity, which includes your brain. See, I would have used, wait, what's that? I would have used that. I would use my brain, but my brain is so big, it just won't fit on this screen. So the dorsal cavity, back, right? So dorsal is the same thing as saying posterior. I don't know, they just like using those words, right? So the dorsal cavity is described as your cranial cavity, which is the brain, and your spinal cavity, your vertebral cavity, which contains your spinal cord. Then you have the ventral cavity. The ventral cavity is all the other parts that ain't the dorsal cavity. Got it? So the ventral cavity, watch it. Ventral, another word for ventral is anterior. So these words can be used interchangeably. Right? So I'm not too crazy about it. So let's look at these cavities, right? We know what the posterior cavity is. Right? It's your brain and your spinal column. Now what we want to do is we want to look at the anterior, right? Or the ventral body cavities. And it's further subdivided. So let's look. All right. So everything in red here, look at the key. Red is your ventral body cavity. I'm going to start at the top. Watch. This guy right here. This guy right here is an area between your lungs. That area between your lungs is called the mediastinum. Right? I don't care about this. I don't care. Right? All I want you to know is the area between the lungs is the mediastinum. The mediastinum ain't a thing. It's a space. Right? One of the big things in the mediastinum is your heart. Everybody thinks your heart's over on your left side. The vast majority, the bulk of your heart is in the space between your lungs called the mediastinum. Then you have the pleural cavity. And the pleural cavity is separate from the mediastinum. Why is it separate? Well, it contains different things, right? The mediastinum contains your heart and some big blood vessels, your esophagus. I like saying that word. You should try it. Say esophagus. And if you want to, maybe you want to name your dog Esophagus or a pet lizard. Anyways, I digress. Watch. So, you got the pleural cavity. And the pleural cavity, as you know, contains your lungs. We should be pretty straight so far. Now, watch. You got this big freaking muscle. It is big. And it, boy, you should write this down or something. Put a star next to it. This big muscle that separates the pleural cavity from the abdominal cavity called your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is involved in breathing. We'll learn more about that later. But the diaphragm completely separates the pleural cavity from the abdominal cavity. And the abdominal cavity is where you have all of your guts. Now, watch. This ain't the time or the place to learn about where all the organs are, right? We'll learn about that as we go through the semester. Just a real quick review, all right? Here we go. You got your liver here. You got, that's a stomach. Looks like a sock. Anyways, draw something else. Then you got, wait, hang on. I'm doing good. Then you got your pancreas over here. Then you got a thing called a spleen over here. Oh yeah. Then you got all kinds of intestines. Boom. Big ones, small ones, some as big as your head. right? So right now, we don't need to know all that. All you need to know is that in the abdominal cavity, you got abdominal organs. And most of those abdominal organs are involved in digesting food that you eat, right? Then finally, the abdominal cavity is further separated into the pelvic cavity. The pelvic cavity contains most of your reproductive organs, right? Uterus, urinary bladder, all that stuff. So, what do I want you to know? This is what I want you to know. I want you to know how the body is separated into cavities, right? And each cavity is going to have a particular group of organs. And as we go through the semester, you're going to learn about that. So don't worry about it. Just understand the different cavities. And give me an idea, a real basic idea, of what's inside each cavity. So watch. If somebody is having abdominal pain, right? Then your first thought should be, hey, something's going on with their digestive tract. Now, as we move through the semester, it'll become more clear. If they're having pelvic pain, well, what's in the pelvis, right? What's in the pelvic cavity? You got your reproductive organs. So you're going to think, hey, something's going on with the reproductive organs. If they're having chest pain, pleural cavity pain, then something could be going on with their heart or lungs. So understanding these cavities is important when you start getting into your clinical classes and understanding disease and treating it. Okay, so